Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. If you don't already know, Spaulding Marine Center started as Spaulding Boatworks in 1951 by Myron. The Boatworks has been in continuous operation since then and is flourishing today as an organization preserving our maritime heritage by ensuring its future. Myron was a legend on the waterfront here in Sausalito and a huge influence on San Francisco Bay sailors during the days when boats were made of wood and built locally by expert craftsmen, many of which I've noticed are in this room. I'll pause there because, like you, I want to hear more about Myron from a close and dear friend of his, Michael Wiener. Michael was a right-hand man to Myron and collaborated with him for years on several interesting boat building projects. Spaulding Marine Center wouldn't be here today without his contributions. We're very fortunate to have him here tonight to share his perspective and experiences being mentored by Myron. With that, I want to hand it over to Sharon from the Historical Society to get things started. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm Sharon Seymour. I'm currently the secretary of the Sausalito Historical Society. I seem to have a frog in my throat. This is the fourth in a series of history talks that the Historical Society has done this year. And for 3 of them, we've collaborated with another local organization, Sausalito Women's Club, and then Portuguese Hall, and now Spaulding. So we're very glad Spaulding was agreeable to doing this. And it's a perfect place for Michael to talk. I'm going to introduce Michael, who was born in Sausalito and lives in the house he was born in, which happens to be Susan Loosely's house. If you're a Women's Club member, you know who Susan Loosely is. As a child, he spent a lot of time running around the unpaved streets of the town and fishing from the pier, formerly next to what is now the Trident. For 30 years, starting in the Village Fair in 1956, his family operated retail stores here in town, handcrafted from Europe. You probably remember that store. He studied the classics at St. John's College, and boy, that's interesting. Ask him about that. They studied everything, reading the classics. Then he served 4 years as an apprenticeship for boat building in Denmark, where he met his wife. Then he worked in the design offices in Los Angeles of Charles Eames and Alexander Gerard on exhibits, films, and furniture design before returning to Sausalito. And he actually ended up at Spaulding because the company that was designing the boats that he was building in Denmark referred him to Spaulding. So he's worked for Spaulding Boatyard since 1978 and did what needed to be done. He said he was the only person around, I think, for a while. After Myron's death in 2000, he became a founding director of Spaulding Wooden Boat Center. Currently, he works with his daughter's electric bike business, and he's a vice president of the Historical Society Board of Directors and a docent, and an all-around helpful guy there, as well as he was at Spaulding. So welcome to Michael.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you all for coming tonight. I'm kind of astounded how many people are here. I spent many, many happy years in this building, and so it is a huge pleasure to be back in it. Building means a great deal to me. And I'd suggest, looking around, look at the floor in particular, and look at the size of the planks. They're all 3 inches thick and 16, 18 inches wide. And I've been here ever since Myron first built the yard. I first walked in the door in 1978 and started working with Myron. He, at that point, was in his 70s, and as time went on, he became more and more reflective. And while we worked, I enjoyed listening to him reminiscing, though I knew I'd only remember bits and pieces of it. But I had many happy years working alongside of Myron. When I agreed to do this talk, I started doing research to supplement my memories and found myself really drawn into Myron's remarkable life. Tonight I want to share some of what I heard from Myron and somewhat of what I discovered in my research about the early years of Myron's life. After the presentation, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or try and answer any questions you may have. When Myron died in 2000, Tom Miller and I were executors of Myron's estate. We faced the dilemma of taking care of the vast amount of things that Myron had saved over his long life. This room was full, absolutely full of things Myron had saved at that point. It was a daunting task and a huge responsibility. We decided to donate all his papers and drawings to the San Francisco Maritime Museum Library. Today, the formal name of the library is the San Francisco Maritime National Historical Park Research Center. It turned out to be the right decision. The Research Center has done a most remarkable job of organizing and archiving Myron's papers, photographs, and drawings. The collection is now beautifully organized and cataloged and available for anybody to see. I want in particular to acknowledge Gina Barty, the extraordinary reference librarian at the Research Center, and Sarah Diamond, who spent many weeks here 24 years ago, packing and listing all of Myron's papers, most of his drawings. Many of you here tonight know a great deal about Myron. It kind of worries me. I'm assuming that everybody knows a lot about Myron. Some of you may know more than I do. But for those of you who don't know much about Myron, I want to do a very brief sketch of who he was. As Matt said, Myron Spaulding was a skillful and successful sailor, a superior designer of boats such as the 50-foot Swami, shown here in this picture, and a highly esteemed boat builder. He was influential in establishing the rules of yacht racing, and he made his living playing the violin. Quoting from Thomas Scahill's entry on Myron in the Encyclopedia of Yacht Designers, written in 1999, which is before Myron died, Myron Spaulding was a legend on San Francisco Bay and the West Coast. His keen intelligence, precise memory, immense fund of knowledge and experience and longevity all combined to establish him as the Dean of West Coast Naval Architects. This was quite a remarkable achievement for a mostly self-educated orphan. Myron's life in and around boats has been spoken of a great deal in articles and excellent talks at the Corinthian, the St. Francis, and other yacht clubs. I will not talk that much about this aspect of his life. But as I immersed myself in Myron's story, I became increasingly fascinated by those parts of his life that have not been covered in depth. His childhood, his youth, and his career as a violinist. Hope I'm not disappointing anybody, but this is what I'll be talking about this evening. Myron was undoubtedly a genius, but every genius is also a person, and looking at them as a person in no way takes away from our admiration of them as a genius. As a boat builder, Myron insisted on understanding things deeply, and only then acting on this understanding. In this regard, Myron was a person of tremendous integrity. I always watched that and wondered, how did he get to be that way? I spent many weeks reading in his archives at the Maritime Museum. Then I took a trip to Eureka, where Myron was born on October 28, 1905. He lived with his mother and brother for the first part of his life in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Eureka. His address was 2237 2nd Street, near X. This address is now a bus parking lot. But walking a half a block to the end of 2nd Street, I took this picture, the one on the left. Undoubtedly, this is the same view that Myron saw when he was a child. A half a block in the other direction, at the end of X Street, were the railroad tracks. One can imagine that as a young child, Myron observed scenes like this trainload of logs coming into the mills in Eureka. Eureka was a booming lumber town in the early part of the 20th century. These pictures are of 2nd Street, 20 blocks from where Myron lived. In the oral history tapes of the Sausalito Historical Society, we can hear Myron recount childhood memories. His earliest memories are of seeing huge logs being sawed in the mill near his home. The sound of the blades whining like the dickens. And like any little young boy, he remembered the excitement of horse-drawn fire engines close to where he lived, brass bells ringing and dogs barking. Often the sounds of things were vivid in his descriptions. The picture on the left, I just couldn't resist. The enormous clear plank of redwood, 12 feet tall and 6 feet wide. The image itself suggests the meaning that wood had in Myron's life and the reverence that figured in everything Myron built throughout his life. Myron's parents were married in 1899. His father, Willis Carroll, was 42 and had been married at least once before. He was almost 20 years older than Myron's mother, May Elizabeth Colby. Their first child died at the age of 2. Myron's brother, named after his father, was born 2 years before Myron. Myron's father was what was called a scaler, a lumber surveyor who worked in the woods, often far away from home. Interestingly, he worked together with his son from his first marriage. Myron's young mother was left to raise the 2 boys alone in the small wooden house on the edge of town. His mother and father lived in 2 very different worlds. I imagine this was Myron's father's world, woodsman out in the field. Myron's father could have been the man in the middle with his arms crossed. Note the children and the many young high school age kids in the front row. The first image we have of Myron is this one. That's Myron on the right, his mother, and Willis Jr. on the left. It's Myron's handwriting on the back of the picture, identifying who's who. They occasionally sailed to visit his father inland near Mount Shasta, sailing first to San Francisco in one of the many steam schooners like the Vanguard, the Sausalito, or the City of Topeka. The Vanguard carried 18 passengers and up to 375,000 board feet of lumber. He talks of a trip he took with his brother when he was about 6 or 7 to visit his father in Castilla near the Castle Craigs in the Mount Shasta area. Myron remembered sailing to San Francisco, taking a ferry to Oakland, and the train on to Castilla. His half-brother Ralph, 15 years older than he, picked them up from the train. Myron remembers being hot with spots and spent the entire visit in bed with the measles. During the same time, Myron's mother met a man with whom she fell in love. We know that on September 21st, 1913, when Myron was 7, she moved with this man to San Francisco and subsequently disappeared from Myron's life. This must have been a desperate move from Myron's mother. These 2 pictures are of May Elizabeth. The one on the left was taken in Eureka. The one on the right, some years later, shows a much happier woman in Michigan. Myron's father tried his best to care for his children. We have this early image of Willis Carroll, taken probably before Myron was born. Myron saved a letter he received from his father when he was 9. His father acknowledges having received a letter from Myron and starts out by saying, "I wish you could get 100% in arithmetic every day, but I know that's more difficult than all the rest." He promises to come back home and be closer to Myron the next year. And in an apparent effort to temper Myron's enthusiasm, he says, "You'd better mind your P's and Q's or you might get a licking once in a while." He reassures Myron, or perhaps himself, that Myron has a good home with his Uncle Ed. I don't believe his intention to create a home for Myron ever materialized. But what's remarkable is that we have this letter at all. Myron saved boxes of correspondence throughout his life. I think this speaks to the insecurity that lived in him as a result of having been abandoned at age 7. In this picture, Myron's 8, taken shortly after his mother left. He said, "My family busted up when I was 7. He recounts his father asking him what instrument he wanted to play. Since his brother played the piano, and Myron was tired of listening to it, he said anything but the piano. And so he remembers the next day, his father came home with a 3/4 size violin. He started taking lessons from Anna Mae Kelly. She may be one of the women in this picture with her students. I think Myron's father tried the best he could. First, he hired a housekeeper in an effort to keep the family together, but soon Myron was farmed out to live with various relatives and foster families. He told of living for a period of time with the family of a non-union longshoreman. Myron remembered hearing him argue with his neighbor, a Dutch union carpenter, who, quote, berated the longshoreman I was living with. I couldn't understand all this. That Myron remembered this almost 90 years later speaks to the important role that unions played in his early life. He says, "I had a miserable time for the next 4 years. On one of his occasional trips to San Francisco on a steam schooner, Myron remembers the captain, knowing that his young passenger could play the violin, insisted that Myron play for the passengers out on the ocean. Myron recounts, "I was lousy." But as a young boy, he continued to enjoy his life. He was first exposed to boats as a result of his desire to learn how to swim. The Sequoia Yacht Club, built in 1904 on an island facing Eureka, had a swimming pool. The pool was built like a ship, redwood planks caulked with oakum. Myron sailed over on a stern wheel ferry named the Antelope. Myron was already then very skinny. His description of his difficulty swimming is classic Myron. "You had to have more than a certain volume for a certain poundage, and if you didn't float. So I had a hell of a time floating in the swimming pool. I had to work like the devil to keep my nose above water." You can almost hear Myron. He was invited to sail on boats like the ones we see in this picture. Myron remembered being puzzled that they were all filled with concrete. He later realized that this was in an effort to enable the boats designed for sailing on the sheltered waters of the East Coast to handle the strong winds of Humboldt Bay. When Myron was 11, we have to remember it was the middle of World War I, the submarine H-3 went ashore on the beach at Samoa, the huge sand spit that forms Humboldt Bay. Sightseers, including Myron, came to see the wreck. The Navy sent a cruiser, the Milwaukee, to pull the submarine off. The Milwaukee, too, went ashore on the bar, and the efforts to save the crew and the ship provided further entertainment for the next few months. Myron recounts how the Milwaukee was eventually taken off in pieces. He was fascinated that the submarine was eventually rolled across the sand dunes to the Humboldt Bay side of the bar and relaunched using techniques developed by the lumber industry for moving big logs. Finally, in 1919, when he was 14, Myron got on the Vanguard one more time. His father had recently been declared incompetent. I was not able to figure out why this dramatic move was taken, but we know that Myron and his brother were made wards of the court. A guardian, William S. Keary, was appointed to oversee all aspects of Myron and his brother's life until they reached maturity. For the next 5 years, Myron lived at the Charles R. Bishop Annex of the Boys' Aid Society of California, described as a boarding home for working boys. From the title, from the little I could find out about it, the Boys' Aid Society sounds rather bleak. The organization presents its mission as finding suitable homes or employment for at-risk boys, many homeless, neglected, or abused, and continuing to provide oversight and systematic attention over time. The society received wards of the court and juvenile offenders from counties in Central and Northern California who were in danger of being imprisoned. The home was an attempt to address the harsh conditions that orphans lived under at the time. Note the motto on their letterhead: every boy is entitled to a fair chance to make good. For Myron, this was an alternative to a life in the woods. But in Myron's case, the boys' home provided him with a stability he had not had since he was 7, when he lost his mother. It must have been a highly structured life, but he remembers being pleased that, as one of the older boys, he had a room of his own, which allowed him to practice the violin as much as he wanted. All his life, Myron had a quality that caused those people who liked him to like him very much. At the Boys' Aid Society, he found in George C. Turner, the superintendent of the home, one of these people. George Turner quickly saw in Myron a boy of great potential. In many ways, Turner took over the role of the father that Myron had recently lost. The boys' home was required to make regular reports of Myron's progress to the court-appointed guardian. We have a wonderful series of letters describing Myron's development through high school and until he went off on his own. Reading through the letters is really very moving. I want to read you just a few excerpts that paint a vivid picture of who Myron was at this early stage in life. I found it pretty exciting to find all these documents and traces of Myron's early life. Hope you can share the excitement. Since coming to San Francisco, Myron has had but 2 interests, boat building and music. Of the 2, his most serious thought has seemed to center on music, boat building taking more of the form of recreation, a relaxation from the almost constant practice, which he has given on his borrowed violin. When he was 19, they write that his musical ability is of a high order, is the opinion of all who have heard him play, professional and laymen alike. And on May 1924, George Turner wrote the court, "Myron is one of the few boys that I have absolute confidence in, and I do not believe we shall be disappointed." Myron was enrolled at San Francisco Polytechnic High School in the fall of 1920. George Turner got him a bicycle. Now he could ride the 1.5 miles from the boys' home to school. We have his report cards from the 4 years he spent at Poly, signed by George Turner in place of his parents. Myron saved all these things. The report cards reflect clearly how Myron developed as a student and how he discovered his gifts in music, woodworking, and technical drawing. Notice the pledge on the back of the report card. I am not now, nor will I become a member of any secret society while a pupil of this school. You wonder what this was made in reference to. During high school, Myron studied violin with Professor Sigmund Anker, a well-known Austrian violinist and violin teacher. His tuition was paid by a benefactor, Mrs. F.H. Morley. Anker had about 30 students and held auditions at the Emporium on Saturday mornings, where mothers would bring their 4 or 5-year-old children to play for Professor Anker. He discovered many talented children, including, most famously, Yehudi Menuhin.
Wow.
After Myron finished high school, he stayed on at the boys' home for 2 more years, playing the violin and working on a boat he had built in woodshop, with the help of sympathetic teachers and the complicity of janitors who let him in to work on his boat after hours. In 1924, he joined the Musicians Union, a prerequisite for working as a musician in San Francisco. A quote from a letter, "The union of the music world is more autocratic than the Kaiser once was." There was a flurry of letters from the boys' home about his progress in finding work as a musician. Their faith in him is obvious, though everyone was clearly a little nervous until he actually started getting jobs that affirmed their confidence in Myron. Here's a close-up of the young graduate from the fall 1923 Paula yearbook. Myron was still living in the boys' home, working on his sailboat, and looking forward to finding his way into the world of professional music. This sail plan is for the original version of the 16-foot boat that Myron built in high school. It is dated 7 months before his graduation. Already in high school, his outstanding drawing ability stands out. Many people helped him. He recounts sliding the boat out of a window of the wood shop and carrying it to the bay on a truck led by Van Arsdale Harris, the wonderful old softwood lumber yard that Myron still bought lumber from in the 90s. He launched the boat almost a year after graduating. At this point, Myron's self-education as a yacht designer really took off. He quickly started learning design lessons. He soon rebuilt the boat, this time with a ballast keel and an inboard rudder. We have some snapshots of the rebuilt boat. The keel actually fell off when he led the boat to a friend to take out into the ocean, but this was just another opportunity to learn. Myron was a voracious learner, and at this time started accumulating a circle of friends involved in the beginnings of yacht racing in San Francisco Bay. A group of young men who were to figure prominently in yacht racing, including Myron, Babe Stevens, Hugh Jacks, and Dennis Jordan, became known as the Polytechnic High School Boys. You have to realize the St. Francis Yacht Club was only established in 1927, and Myron was really right there at the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Here we see Myron in his new tux and violin, both paid for by Evelyn T. Morley. She was the widow of an engineer, Frederick H. Morley, who tragically died in a Yosemite climbing accident. He left his wife a comfortable income that she used for the support of boys at the home. Quoting from the final letter from George Turner to the court, Myron has certainly developed into a very high-class young man, and I feel has a successful future ahead of him. Myron was indeed to be a high-class man all the rest of his life. After joining the Musicians Union, Myron eventually started getting work with bands and orchestras around San Francisco Bay, Santa Cruz, and Los Angeles. I clearly remember Myron telling of his pleasure going from venue to venue of vaudeville and silent film houses, playing music. This map, one can see how many of the sites were located along Market Street and around the Civic Center. One can forget how important this type of entertainment was in the years before radio and television became common in people's homes. During this time, a huge corruption scandal rocked San Francisco. It had started during Myron's childhood. Eugene "Handsome Gene" Schmitz, a violinist in the San Francisco Symphony and a president of the Musicians Union, one of the strongest unions in San Francisco, was the San Francisco mayor from 1901 to 1907, including the earthquake years. In 1907, Schmitz was found guilty of extortion and bribery and sentenced to San Quentin. He was again elected to the Board of Supervisors in 1917 and 1926. This era of corruption, so close to Myron's music world, must have had a profound influence on his worldview. As many of you know, late in life, Myron came increasingly to understand events as instances of corruption, which I'm sure is probably due to growing up where and when he did. At the same time, Myron was corresponding with the foremost boat designers in Northern Europe, including Johann Anker, who designed the Dragon, And Knut Riemer, considered one of the most important Scandinavian boat designers of the 20th century. Myron, of course, owned the first Dragon to come to San Francisco Bay. And a number of other boats, all right here in the first 10 years of his grown-up life. But a lot was going on around San Francisco in this period. A lavish Fox Theater opened in 1929. Myron recounted the thrill of rising up in the orchestra pit of the Fox Theater as it rose on its mechanical lift to the front of the stage. He accumulated a huge collection of music scores for use in the many venues he played. I remember so clearly Myron talking about the need to improvise programs to suit the action of the scenes on the screen. Different music for chase scenes, romantic scenes, dramatic scenes. And the musicians just had to know what to do. On March of 1930, Myron was rushed by ambulance to a hospital with a burst appendix. He was to spend the next 3.5 months there. We have a letter from his Uncle Ed in Forestville. I was sorry to hear you came near losing your life. That was a close call, and I'm glad to hear you are improving now. Myron still had 2 more operations and was in the hospital months after this letter. But in 1931, Myron signed his first contract with the symphony. Finally, he was set financially. For his entire 30-year career, Myron made a good living playing the violin. I used to think that this was just his day job that supported his true passion, sailing. I see it differently now. Myron is clearly a gifted musician. I think it is wrong to underestimate the importance of music in his life. As talkies took over and vaudeville disappeared, Myron played steadily for the symphony, the opera, and the ballet. The question for me is, how did music inform and influence his life as a designer and boat builder? There seemed to be sensibilities and skills that he applied to both of these apparently disparate disciplines. As unlikely as it seems, I think there are parallels. Myron played under 5 different conductors during his 30 years. Playing for the symphony, he talked about all of them. He told me how he liked Enrique Horta, because he was no nonsense, in contrast with other more flamboyant conductors. Here's just a few pictures of Myron in the symphony. The earliest one is from 1937 and the latest from 1955. Looks pretty good in there. That's Myron on the left in costume. I imagine occasionally playing with the opera may have been a little embarrassing for Myron, but the pay was good. This opera contract, dated October 1937, Myron received $90 a week, which equals about $2,000 a week in today's money. In addition, he got $25 per performance, which is the same as $500 in today's money. He often played many performances in one day. He was increasingly busy juggling his dual interests. Myron's Union notebook from 1936 shows the intense schedule he maintained. We have a number of these notebooks, and they're all full to the brim. It's just unbelievable. Note the Union meetings printed in the calendar. Sometimes he would play 3 or 4 opera performances in one day. On Tuesday, April 2nd, we see squeezed in the first mention of the upcoming Honolulu race.
Where?
Myron also worked in George Whalen's design office during this period, which helped him in his later years as official measurer for the Yacht Racing Association. When Myron was 27, he went to the Humboldt Evening High School in the Ferry Building in San Francisco to study navigation. This was to be his only year of formal education beyond high school. The next year, he was proud to invest in a sextant. I left a little envelope with a key in it.
that what it says?
On July 4th, 1936, Myron skippered the already famous Sparkman and Stevens 52-foot yawl Dorade in the Honolulu race, coming in first in the fleet and first on corrected time. A huge triumph for a 30-year-old violinist. Now these wonderful pictures of Myron. They're some of the only ones we have of Myron without a shirt and a tie on.
Yes.
This is maybe the only image we have of Myron exhibiting both of his interests. Here he poses with a viola on board the Odyssey, which he skippered in the 1939 Transpac. During the years leading up to World War II, Myron worked with Herb Madden Sr. at the Madden and Lewis yard here in Sausalito. Myron greatly admired Herb Madden Sr., an excellent sailor, and the yard itself had a profound influence on Myron. By now he had developed a reputation as a designer, and the next year, when Myron was 32, Walter Anderson commissioned him to design what became the 38-foot Nottingham, built by Anderson and Christophany for Max Blum. This was Myron's first design to gain wide recognition. Shortly after war was declared in Europe, Myron applied to the U.S. Navy Reserve. Though he was highly qualified and had many excellent references, his appointment was denied. The official explanation cited his being 37 pounds underweight. Same problem he had trying to learn to swim. In later years, Myron suggested corruption. The sale of commissions was the cause of his denial. But around this time, Myron resumed communication with his mother, who had moved to Michigan. They were to correspond for the next 33 years. We have a series of 40 letters from his mother, all addressed, "Dear Son," and signed, "Your Mom." Myron took a trip to visit his mother. She looks happy. He looks conflicted, probably torn between the trauma of being abandoned at an early age and his happiness of being reunited with his mother. During the war years, Myron continued juggling his different interests. Along with playing the violin, he ran his own design office at 617 Montgomery Street in San Francisco, worked in the engineering department at Madden and Lewis, and did survey work for the War Shipping Administration. Here's a picture of Myron in the back row of the crew of Madden and Lewis. They were building wooden minesweepers and 110-foot subchasers for the U.S. Navy and the British, U.S. and the British Navy. The launching of the Swami in 1947 was big news. Swami was spoken of as a hopeful contender for the Honolulu race of that year. Arvid Johnson, a house carpenter from Finland, was another of those friends who played a major role in Myron's life. Myron recalls how just after the war, Arvid and a group of his friends had asked Myron to design an easy-to-build plywood 33-footer. Arvid found a lot out on Hunter's Point where he and his friends built a series, I think 9 of these boats. Myron evidently bought fasteners and fittings, which he tried to sell to the individual builders of the 33s. I'm afraid business cannot be considered to be one of Myron's many gifts. Repeatedly throughout his life, he found himself having made less than ideal business decisions. His agreement with his friends Cliff Peterson and Shirley Morgan to sell them the plans for the 20-foot Clipper-class sailboat was another one of these. Over 60 of these beautiful little boats were built. But by the terms of the agreement, Myron received no further compensation beyond the initial sale of the design. I don't know if you can read this, but that's Arvid Johnson launching the boat. And there was a tradition of slapping the boat on each side of the bow with a dead herring. In the mid-1940s, Myron began to design what he called his When and If boatyard for a site at McNear's Beach in Santa Fe. It was to be in the Steamer Gold Warehouse, an an abandoned building near a brick factory. Myron talks of building the 36-foot buoyant girl there together with his friend Bob Crowley. To me, it is a mystery of how they built and launched the buoyant girl in 1 year. But there are many mysteries that need to be discovered in Myron's life. He spoke often of the many friends who helped him: Bob Crowley, Eddie Leonard, Bonner Ralston, Joe McAleese, Don Duncan, among many others. In an interview with Annie Sutter, Myron says, "Boy, if it weren't for friends, I'd never have had a boat shop." Myron designed himself a comfortable little apartment upstairs at his Waterfront boatyard. I think having a place to live, though never of primary concern to Myron, was always something of an issue for him. In the 10 years between 1926, when he moved out of the boys' home, and 1936, he had 5 different addresses in San Francisco. Even at the end of his life, Myron always maintained a bunk and basic living facilities in his office. Under mysterious circumstances, Myron lost his lease at McNear's Beach, and again, with the help of friends, moved all his machines and lumber to Sausalito. I think the floor of this building is probably some of the lumber he moved. He bought this property in 1951, and over the next few years, together with Arvid Johnson, built the yard, much as we see it today. He resigned from the symphony around 1955. Myron's personal life was always distinctly segmented from his professional life. I think we can understand this in light of the events of his life that we've been looking at. This defining feature of Myron's life is described with great insight and humor in a letter written to Myron by his old friend, Commodore Tompkins. Commodore wrote, "We are a trifle uncertain about the news from Sausalito regarding you and Gladys. We got a very nice Christmas card from Gladys, which indicated she had a brand new surname. The preceding letter from you indicated that you had a brand new crane. By careful comparison of postmarks, we decided that Gladys got hers before you got yours. And the gentlemanly thing for you to have done would at least have been to mention the event." This letter is dated January 31st, 1963. Myron and Gladys had been married 2 months earlier. So by the time of this letter, Myron had been working on his yard here in Sausalito for 8 years. Myron stopped playing this in a symphony to apply his full attention to building the 45-foot Chrysopoly, which he finally launched in 1961. In 1955, in 55, when Myron was 50, a new phase of his life started. And I've lost my cursor here. Let's see. Oops, that was the wrong thing to do. In any case, the new phase started in 1955. The story of the building of Chrysopoly is an interesting one. The story of his life after 1955 is a colorful and interesting one. But I want to leave that for another talk. Right now, I'd like to ask you if you have any questions.
Wow.
Wow.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah, there's a lot to tell about Myron. I mean, he led a tremendously colorful life, and I found myself kind of sucked into the details of his childhood and youth, which, I hope has some meaning to you.
He does.
You have us riveted.
Yeah.
And now
Absolutely.
you've left your audience wanting.
Well, I'll put on a nice picture for you to look at. Right? Hey, this is Ida, my granddaughter.
Oh, hey!
It was just her birthday 2 days ago.
Birthday. Birthday.
35 auxiliary suite.
Yes.
Did Myron, have I heard this or am I just making this up? Did he ever make any musical instruments? Violins?
I don't think so. I wish he had. But no, I don't think so. he always had a benefactor who gave him a violin. I actually inherited his last violin, and I mean, it was really a piece of junk. I mean, it was just hopeless.
Did you ever hear him play?
I never heard him play either. You know, he put that life behind him, and by the time I met Myron, I never heard him play, I never saw him sail.
Oh.
But you know, it was his
Did
early
he stop
70s.
playing the violin, or you just never?
I
heard
think
it?
he actually stopped playing the violin when he stopped playing in the symphony.
Was he a concertmaster?
He was, now the confusion is, he was a first violin. That talks about a group of violinists, the first violinist, second violinist. He was a first violinist, played in the first violin group, but he was not the first
He was
violinist.
not principal.
Yeah, he was not the principal.
Two questions. Did he do his own drawings like that one? And what was he like to work for or with?
Yeah, about the drawings. I mean, I have a couple of drawings. To me, this is a most extraordinary one, but this one is as well. These are huge drawings drawn with ink on vellum, and they're just breathtaking. And yes, he did his own drawings, and he did his own drawings, you know, until the end of his life. I mean, he was he did his thinking drawing. And so he would do, you know, a rough sketch, and then he would do a tighter sketch, and then he would do a drawing like this. I've got some of his drawings where you can see the erase marks, and he worked hard on them. But these final drawings were breathtaking. And one second, let me just answer the second question,
What
because
was he like to work for or with?
Myron was wonderful to work for. I mean, Myron was, you know, like George Turin noticed, a really high-class human being. I mean, he was wonderful to work for. I only saw him lose his temper once, and that's when I very first started working here. And I was planing away on something in a cockpit, and he got so upset that I was planing away and at risk of planing away too much. And he basically said, you know, stop, think. And that was the only time. He was great to work.
He actually helped me a couple of times.
Somebody had his hand up over there.
Just an aside, a quick question. When I was a kid in town, I used to hang out with a guy named Jerry Spaulding.
Jerry Spaulding.
Jerry, he was a jeweler across the, was there?
I don't know of any connection between the two. There are a lot of Spauldings around.
Yeah. But
Myron didn't have any children. His brother lived far away. I don't think so.
Is that a working drawing? Could you build a boat from
You
that
could build a
drawing?
boat
Are there
from-
more- Is there more after that?
This is interesting. This drawing and this are all you need to build a boat.
So that's a-
This is what's called a table of offsets.
Are there multiple sections through the length of the boat?
There is a set of sections also that I am not showing here. The sections would, oopsie, sorry.
Oops,
Oh, no,
Let's go there.
how do I get back to this?
we've been there.
Where's that?
My savior.
I don't know. Could be Hawaii.
Yeah, they're all the Maritime Museum, yeah. Oh, thank you. So let's see, can I get to the one after it? Let's see, yes. So this is what's called a table of offsets. It has sections shown on it, but they're descriptive. The entire shape of the boat is in that chart, which, you know, as a child blew me away, and was kind of the reason why I wanted to learn boat building. How can the shape of a boat be in a chart of numbers? Well, it is.
So, and did he study the geometry or
He didn't.
trigonometry?
He studied everything you can study in high school, but he clearly had skill at drawing. I know for my own sake that Myron thought in drawing. I mean, drawing was a form of thinking for him, and these are formal drawings. These are end of the story. This is the result of a great deal of thought. But now I forgot what the question was.
As a designer, is the shape from just intuition, or does he have something to know about fluid mechanics? Does he know about flow over
It's
whole?
crazy.
What about the level of technology versus just drawing?
You know, originally boats were built from models. You know, somebody would carve a model that looked about right based on what they'd learned from sailing with their father and generations and so on. And then the model would be sawn up and a table offsets like this. Which I do.
Touch any key.
Would be made. Myron learned a great deal. He studied a lot of designers. Wait a minute, how do I get back and forth so I don't do that again? Oh, there it is. Okay. Myron studied a lot. It didn't spring out of him, but he learned a great deal and he was brilliant. I mean, he was just absolutely brilliant. He did not study fluid hydrodynamics. He had no higher education.
Self-taught. He could read music.
He could read music and he could sail.
Michael, how many designs and boats did Myron actually build?
How many boats did he actually build?
Yeah, all designs.
I wish I could answer that question. I think, well, it depends what you include. He built Chrysopolis for sure. He built Boy and Girl. He built the boat he built in high school. Other people built boats of his design. I mean, he designed 7 or 8 boats, plus the Clipper and the 33. There were a few of his designs that were never built, I think. That's a kind of a funnily, strangely difficult question. Myron was a violinist and a designer. Personally, and from my experience, he liked working with his hands, but I only think he started doing that after he stopped playing the violin at 55. And they built Chrysopolis here. He had some good boat builders working. He spoke of them, and he had some outstanding boat builders working at the yard. I mean, I think the reason he took me in is because I had worked at a yard in Denmark, served an apprenticeship in Denmark, and had worked at Anderson Christophany, that he highly respected. But I think one could probably say he designed 7 or 8 boats that were built.
The Spaulding 33, was that?
That was one of his designs, but he built it as an easy-to-build boat for other people. So there were, as far as I know, 9 of them built. Most of them built over at Hunters Point, built mostly by their owners. Some of them may have been kits. I honestly don't know. Yes, Mike?
The boat that was here just before he died, that Tom lived in, he built.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's another one. I forgot all about that. So there was a Spaulding 28 that Myron designed and built for his friend Bob Crowley. It took Myron so many years to build that boat, and it was so lovely that Bob Crowley, who was not much younger than Myron, got tired of waiting and bought himself a fiberglass boat. But that boat is out on the dock. Tom Miller wandered, the molds for the boat are up there, yeah. Tom Miller wandered into the yard kind of like I did, and he ended up living on that boat for many years and finishing it. It was 99.9% finished, but Tom did an exceedingly good job finishing it, launched it, and has taken beautiful care of it ever since. So that is, another one of Myron's designs.
And what is it called?
Aerate.
It's called Spaulding 28.
Aerate.
Pardon me?
The name of
Oh,
it.
Aerate, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Tom called it Aerate. Virtue in Greek. Mike?
And did Myron build boats on the upper floor of the theater building?
Myron sold the design to Clipper. Clipper had a yard for building boats on the upper floor of the theater on Caledonia Street. Myron didn't do it, but they were built there. I think they were built as kits. I think they were built by Clipper. There were lots of them built, 60 some odd. And there's still quite a few around. But those, I mean, I was going to include a picture. They're wonderful pictures of that loft up there where those small boats were built.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that picture's on the Historical Society website
Of
of the boats upstairs.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That wasn't. I mean, Myron may have gone up there once in a while. I have no idea. There ended up, Myron, was unhappy about what happened to the Clipper. I mean, he basically sold the design to a company that wanted to build boats, and it kind of got out of his hands.
Did Myron design and build this building?
Myron designed this building. Arvid Johnson built it with Myron. But, yes, they built it together. They built the dock first, and they put the building on top of it. But Myron built it in such a way, he knew perfectly well this land was settling, and he built it so that it could be jacked up periodically. And he took great pride in keeping this building at the level at which he had originally built it. And, I and anybody else who worked with Myron spent many, 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 many hours underneath the building with big jacks and hammer, wedges, and lifting the building up. So he built it with that in mind. I mean, Myron was incredibly thoughtful. I can't emphasize that enough. And to me, that is the ultimately admirable thing. We all try and think, but he really succeeded.
We walked through the water to get here.
Well, you can be glad that he's not here talking about that water, because he was so angry about that. Long story, which I won't go into.
The water.
Yes.
He must have had maybe a very good math or mechanical drawing teacher back in his days to do such extraordinary drawings.
I'm sure he had an excellent mechanical drawing teacher.
He went to Poly.
He went to Poly, and they did mechanical drawing, but I did mechanical
And
drawing.
one other thing I wanted to say is probably the reason he didn't come here to actually work here until he quit the orchestra is because it's not recommended that violinists be very close to band saws.
Well, he went up north, the Pacific Northwest, and bought a big bandsaw. All right, so somebody has a question back there? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Was Myron's father's name Spaulding?
Yes, he was.
And then secondly,
Willis Curtis, Willis.
I didn't catch that.
I didn't
Yes,
catch
it was
that either.
Spaulding. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And so then what is the connection between this boatyard and the boats that they have? The largest ferry boat out here, it's called the Spaulding boats, our largest.
The boat that goes, the Golden Gate Ferry,
Yeah.
the relationship between Myron and that boat,
Yeah, is there any? Or-
not that I know of, but I didn't even know that the ferry boat was called Spaulding, so I'm sorry.
I didn't know that
There's a
either.
lot I don't know. And there may be a connection. Not with Myron's father, but with Myron. I mean, the whole story of Myron's father is to me kind of interesting, but only peripherally. Yes?
Well, I'd just like to say, I think that all of us, I know how much work it is, so I don't hate to even say it, but we want you to go further with Myron.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I have to say, I really enjoyed it.
And I remember.
What a great job.
Myron's memorial service, and I remember a series of people speaking that included Commodore Tompkins and Tom Wiley.
Oh.
And person after person, all of whom were notable sailors, said that Myron was the person that had the most influence on them. And so he obviously was a great teacher. And I don't know if you remember others or other parts of that memorial service.
I do remember the memorial service. I think that Myron just had this amazing approach to life that one couldn't help admiring, and that is that business of really deeply trying to understand things and then act on them. I mean, one thing about this building, there isn't a decorative touch in the building. I mean, not a single decorative touch. And if you look at how he did the windows, they put up the walls, they cut a hole in the wall and put a piece of glass on it. One could call it functional, but it's beyond that.
Utilitarian.
It's utilitarian, but it rises beyond being functional or utilitarian to being downright beautiful. And where does that beauty come from? It somehow comes from the thought that went into it. We have, if you look at the early drawings of Myron's when and if boatyard, it looks a lot like this in principle, not nearly as big. And this looks a lot like the Madman Lewis yard in Sausalito before it burned down. Yeah.
One of the beauty of this building is in the exposed framing. that you see how this is. The framing isn't covered up.
Right.
Walls or roof. That's
Yeah.
That's the artistic part of it.
Well, I mean, that's purely practical. But, I think Myron was mostly interested in structure. I mean, I remember so clearly working on boats, and you've got this skin on the boat. It's such a problem. You got the skin, you can't see what's going on inside. We'd spend hours sort of transferring, the structure of the boat to the outside. So, structure being visible, not a bad thing. And this drawing talks about, this is all you need to know about the structure of the boat in order to build it. And this is sort of all the details.
Bulkhead.
You know something else about this place? It feels like a theater.
Like a theater.
You're up there, and I think about Great American Music Hall, et cetera, but there is really something about this place because of the wood and the acoustics that I think that his musical sensibilities.
Well, that's what I was sort of trying to point at a little bit. It was like that picture of the big, huge plank. I mean, that kind of stuff just was part of Myron. The way you can't really see it very clearly, but these balconies are kind of hung from the rafters. I mean, it's really elegant, and it would make a wonderful theater.
The acoustics are phenomenal here.
The acoustics are amazing.
We had a violin concert here. It was awesome.
It was amazing.
I believe it.
For that, yeah.
Yes.
I was out on my walk and I saw all these little kids just coming through the door, and I went, oh, let's see what's going on. And they were having a summer camp, and the energy was just incredible. They were so excited about what they were doing. And I just peeked in and thought, what an opportunity for these kids.
Isn't that great?
Thank you for the summer camp.
Well, that's Bill, to Bill's credit. This is Bill Ettinger, who's, what are you, Bill?
Yes, Bill.
My Bill made all that happen, I must say.
The feather in my cap, or the flagship program, is our apprenticeship program, which we started 4 years ago, so we're on our 4th cohort now.
Cool.
Training young people who are not necessarily destined for college to become marine service technicians.
Yeah, I remember talking to Bill about that probably 20 years ago or something, where this was a dream of his, and I have always thought the apprenticeship model is the greatest model for learning for some people. And I mean, the apprenticeship that I did was 4 years, and you just worked alongside of other builders in the yard and learned, and then tested at the end. But it's a great way to learn, and I'm glad you're doing it. Very glad.
Thank you.
Folks are talking about this building, and I would liken it to the nave of a church, where you have the aisles along the sides and the mezzanines. I've always thought of it as a temple to wooden buildings.
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting how it became that, because nobody tried to make a temple, but it became it because he built it the way he did. If we're only in half the building right now, there's another half over there that's equally beautiful.
But if you go into a church, they have a nave with columns. high ceiling.
That's the part that goes up to God.
The elevator.
That's the elevator.
Well, thank you all for coming there.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for this. This has been amazing, and I would like you to think about doing a sequel.
Yes, do we want them again?
Yeah.
What's the name of your granddaughter?
Oh. This is Ida.
Yay.